Conservatives and Labour are very different in terms of how they deal with their leaders. Ask pretty much anyone who follows the news, and they could probably explain to you how the Conservative Party policy on it works. MPs submit letters to the 1922 committee, the 1922 committee count them, and if they have letters of no confidence that reach a threshold, they have a vote, and unless they get a resounding win, they are forced to resign. And we've seen this mechanism used repeatedly. It's rather ruthless, it's very public, but Hemi knows what she's in for in the autumn. Now, Starmer's a different matter. Starmer is in the Labour Party, and the Labour Party doesn't really have such a mechanism. Can you remember a party leader who was voted out by his own party? And I say his because they don't elect women as party leader. So, just running back through the Labour leaders since the 1980s, Michael Foot resigned after a landslide election loss from his longest suicide note in political history. Neil Kinnock resigned the leadership in 92 when he lost an eminently winnable election because of his showy victory rally the day before the vote. John Smith died. Margaret Beckett, they should have had a woman. Margaret Beckett stood in while they elected a leader. Then Tony Blair resigned, stood down in a deal that had been long agreed with Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown stood down after he lost the election. Harriet Harman, she stood in, again, you see, not voted for. We really don't like voting for women for the Labour Party. Not for leader. So, she stood in. Then they picked the wrong Miliband. So, Ed stood down after his gravestone of a manifesto. Harriet Harman rocked up again, the perennial stand-in for party leaders while they elected a new one. Jeremy Corbyn stood down after his destruction of the Labour Party at the polls. And now we have Keir Starmer, the friend of Jeremy Corbyn, who now doesn't remember being a friend. Well, he won a resounding victory, and he won that victory not because we knew what he stood for. He was very wise. He didn't tell us what he stood for. He knew that everyone wanted the Tories out. And really, he should just nod gently from the bylines as the Tories cut themselves down. And that's what he did. So in he comes. We don't know what his policies are. And after a year, who can actually say what his policies are? It's been a year of terrible leadership. Diane Abbott put it very well when she said the problem with Keir Starmer is he doesn't understand politics. He didn't have to earn his place. He was parachuted into a safe seat, so he never had to be a councillor. He had to never go from a councillor to a candidate. He never had to lose an election as a candidate. He never had to win a narrow election and then build a base within a constituency. He just rocked up, had the Islington elite fawning at someone who was even more left-wing than them, and well, very credible guy. He's been Director of Public Prosecutions. So he lacks that political nous. He spent most of the year, it seems, talking about Nigel Farage. It's like the only thing he seems to think about. He's given away land that really doesn't belong, let's be honest. He's made loads of dubious decisions. He has a foreign secretary who's so useless that he's not allowed to go abroad and shake hands with foreign dignitaries unless Sir Keir Starmer's there to hold the other hand. He's got a Chancellor who he appointed who isn't the economist she made herself out to be, and it is blindingly obvious that she is tanking the economy. And that's a subject for another video because these are difficult times. This is the end of growth. There has been no growth anywhere in the Western world meaningfully, or certainly let's say in Europe, in the last 5 years. Well, she's not the person that's going to deliver it. Then you've got a Home Secretary who says, or at least her department say, that migrants take precedence over locals. We had last year's riots, which, frankly, let's be honest, could have been prevented or at least reduced if Keir Starmer's authoritarian approach wasn't to throw petrol on the fire so that he could burn the bad right-wing people. We needed a leader who could bring consensus, who could bring common sense. But instead of saying this is not the right approach, and this is the truth that you're going to be told, they went out of their way to hide it, and only really brought it by an end with allying with an NGO to falsify a pretend mass riot on the Wednesday, which they were then able to whip the media into carrying the same story on. This is, well, it's very left-wing approach. Show trials, speedy justice. It's right out of Stalin's playbook. But Starmer lacks the ruthlessness of Stalin, doesn't he? Sorry, Keir, you're no Stalin. I mean, really, after a year, do we know what the toolmaker's son actually stands for? Because I've no idea. I understand that a lot of his MPs seem to stand for being elected again. That's quite common across MPs, let's face it. Everyone wants to keep their job. But it has to be blindingly obvious to the MPs in Parliament that Keir Starmer is steering a sinking ship, that he is on a terminal trajectory with his vote. The fact that Reform are now polling the same as the Conservatives and Labour put together, the fact that even though they cancelled half of the local elections on, I would argue, a spurious grounds, they still managed to be decimated by Reform. The fact that every election since has shown a decline. They've just not really covered them on the media, but it still happened. All the solutions that are thrown out seem to always work out to be useless. We're going to smash the gangs. Well, the only person I know who's been prosecuted for gang leading was caught by the Tories. So where are these gang smashings? They're going to work with the French. Yes, £500 million, and every time there's a really sticky point in immigration in Britain, the French rock up and cut up a dinghy. The problem is that they don't do it in between. Apparently they stop 40% of crossings. The problem is they're measuring the 40%, and are they really stopping that many? And if they are, great, well that's wonderful, except that migrants get to go 10 times if they want. And look at this issue with the flags this week. In some parts of the country there's a flag on every lamppost. Birmingham Council, who can't afford to take the bins away most of the time, are able to dedicate forces to take down British flags because the unique weight of the British flags damages lampposts in the way that Gazan flag and Ukraine flag would never do. So, why doesn't he tell us where he stands on this properly, not in a waffling la-di-da way, but how is he going to tell the people that he doesn't disrespect them for respecting their flag? Because much as he likes to call people far right, those people who voted for Brexit, most of them were at the very least potential Labour voters. And those people standing outside migrant hotels peacefully protesting, the majority of them will have voted Labour at some point. This is not the far right. This is the common man. We used to call them the working man, but Keir can't define that. So, how long is it before the MPs wake up and realise that after the next election, they'd still like to have a job? And at that point, how do they get rid of Keir Starmer? Because there have to be some sharp knives. Now, I don't know the process by which they get rid of a leader, but I would suspect sharp knives behind closed doors.